My name is Lori Smith, and I'm Dudley's town clerk. For generations, Dudley residents, returning home from military service as far back as the Civil War, or coming home from a family vacation, or traveling home to celebrate the holidays with their families, have been greeted by the stone towers of Stevens Mill. Serving as our community's foremost historical landmark, Stevens Mill has been a symbol of the woolen mills that once made Dudley an industrial force in Massachusetts, and a symbol of our community and home. Stevens Mill was built on the site of Merino Dudley Woolen Manufacturing Company, which was built in 1812. It later became Dudley Woolen sometime around 1821, following the failure of Merino Dudley in 1816 after the War of 1812. The mill complex went by many names during its period of operation as a textile factory, which lasted over 150 years, but it was known as Stevens Linen Works for the longest amount of time, from around 1865 to 1939. The focal point of the mill complex is the granite mill built by Henry Hale Stevens during the Civil War. The Stevens Linen Works Historic District in Dudley is the site of the first, as well as the last, factory in the United States to spin flax and weave linen cloth by machine. It is now the only remaining example of a linen manufacturing plant in the United States. Some of the buildings from the original mill complex have been demolished, while others have been altered. However, most of the major structures and buildings built in or after 1862 are still relatively intact. No structures before 1859 are remaining in the district. The Stevens Mill complex is unique for its lasting physical integrity, as it is extremely well preserved. It also provides architectural significance as an example of a textile mill from the 19th century that is still standing today. The historical significance of Stevens Mill comes from its association with the nation's textile industry and its manufacture of linen. The manufacturing of cotton and wool was fairly common in the country, but the manufacturing of linen was very rare. Henry Hale Stevens was the first American business owner to break into the market by producing linen with machinery, as well as being one of the few who remained successful. It is also significant for how long it lasted, being officially founded in 1846 and continuing operation until 1993. It was even still in use for textile manufacturing until 2003. Now, however, we are at a crossroads that will decide the fate of our symbol of home. Right now, as it has for the majority of the last 27 years, the mill complex sits uninhabited and uninhabitable, deteriorating more and more as each day passes. It's important that we remember what the building complex used to be and begin thinking about what, if anything, it will mean to future generations.
Over the last decade, 7 investors have engaged my predecessors and shown different levels of interest in Stevens Mill. 6 of those investors, after calculating the risk, came to the conclusion that, among other things, risking $40 million to redevelop the abandoned mill was a gamble that they were just not willing to take. So the mill remained largely abandoned, except for a flea market that was operated on weekends out of the loading area. Eventually, occupation of the building in any form was deemed by local fire officials to be too much of a risk to public safety and too much of a risk to our first responders, and the building was closed indefinitely.
Hello, I'm Dudley Police Chief Stephen Weiner. I've been a member of the Dudley Police Department for over 32 years. When I started working in 1988, I had the opportunity to know the Stevens Linen Mill as a prominent manufacturing company. Linen products were sold all around the world from the small town of Dudley. Over the years, it expanded its footprint and altered its work. Unfortunately, like many other manufacturing businesses in our country, in the late 1990s and early 2000s, it was forced to close. It was used for some time as an indoor flea market. Now it is simply permanently closed and abandoned. Abandoned buildings are a haven for problems, as some people, including the homeless, can enter them. There is some evidence of this taking place. This can not only be a hazard for fires, but also can be a location for drug use or other illicit activities. This can lead to such things as drug overdoses and vandalism. There's a risk of injury or death associated with these activities, and overall a deterioration of the quality of life of people in the neighborhood. As the area residents know, this section of town has been a traffic concern for a very long time. When the mill was built in 1864, motor vehicles were not traveling on our roads. This is now a heavily traveled area. The roadways were not built to accommodate the traffic flow along with that of pedestrians, bicyclists, and other travelers. If you take the time to drive along Village Street past the building, take notice of the sidewalk. It's laid out along the westerly side of the building, and when it ends, it meets the corner. Pedestrians must walk out into the road before re-entering the sidewalk to continue down the street. This is certainly dangerous for pedestrians. How is it for those in a wheelchair with mobility issues? It's nearly impossible to navigate with any sense of safety. The building is the central meeting point for West Main Street, Village Street, Hardlock Place, and Mill Street. These are all heavily traveled routes for people going through that area of town. Not far from here is the intersection of West Main Street and Scoville Avenue. This is the main route leading up to the Stevens building. This has been an area of concern for a long time. Its design is not compatible for the traffic that flows through it. This intersection and the surrounding streets are in desperate need of improvements. Like anything else, this will take money. Our town does not have that. If this facility can proceed towards renovation, we would not only limit the damage and other problems associated with an abandoned building, we can make immediate safety improvements to the footprint it occupies. More importantly, we will be eligible for grant funding to improve the surrounding area. This building's historical position and a need for infrastructure improvements are necessary with a renovated facility, and they can provide the town with an improved position for state and federal financial opportunities. This is a great chance to revitalize the building, address safety concerns, and improve the quality of life for our residents. Developing the mill will make our community a safer and more secure place for us and our families to live and work. I appreciate the opportunity to address this topic. If you need to contact me about anything, please reach out to the department at 508-949-8023 or sweiner@dudleypolice.com. Thank you for the time.
Hi, my name is Dean Kochanowski. I'm the Dudley Fire Chief and the Emergency Management Director. And we're going to discuss the mill a little bit today and the fire department's involvement in the mill. As you know, Stevens Mill is an historical site. It's been vacant for a few years now. It poses several safety risks to the community as it is vacant, and it has no operating sprinkler system and no fire alarm system. It's also accessible to the outside, where we found squatting taking place in there and people going in and out of the mill. We've raised these concerns for a few years now, and we're trying to rectify the problem. I believe that it would be a good thing if this apartment project was allowed to go forward. It would bring the mill up to code, and it would solve several problems that we have with the mill at this time. We took some video recently inside the mill, and which you'll see in the following clip, that shows the safety hazards. They are real. It does pose a threat, and there is a red X on the building, which means the firefighters will not be entering the building under fire conditions. It'll be an exterior attack. All right, so we're here at Stevens Mill today. We're doing a little walkthrough and a virtual tour of the mill to show the deplorable conditions of the mill. Alan just took some shots of us first walking in. As you can see, there's a huge fire load in here of leftover trash from the old flea market that was not picked up. He shows a picture of the fire suppression system, which there is none because the water and electricity is shut off, and all the gauges are zero, so the building's totally unprotected. So we'll be walking through the rest of the mill at this time. More evidence of squatting. We got a little setup in here. So this is the boiler room from the inside of the building. We can't even walk in there because the floor is not safe to walk on. The building's on the verge of collapse. Again, right into the French River, which would be a major disaster. All right, so this room here we discovered with the window open. It's obvious that people are using this area for whatever squatters, people being in here that shouldn't be in here. Creates a very dangerous situation. So we've got 4 55-gallon drums of an unknown substance, possibly hazardous materials. As you can see, the bottom of the bins are starting to rust. So that could become a real serious issue depending on what's in there. Okay, so we're in a section of the lower part of the mill. If you look up top, some support joists have been cut illegally, I will add. And this creates a serious collapse hazard. So we got rotted floor pieces here, as you can see. Not even going to walk on it because you might fall through.
Paul, go ahead and kill a light for a minute. This is daytime. Firefighters come in with a smoke condition, they're not going to see anything.
So we just did a brief walkthrough to show the conditions of the mill. There is a red X on this building, so if there is any kind of fire in this building, we will be doing exterior operations only. So my suggestion would be either let this mill get developed or tear it down, and sooner rather than later, because this is a serious public safety hazard as well as a health hazard for the town of Dudley.
So how do we solve the problem? We start by defining it. What we do know is that risk is the common thread. We know that there is a significant financial risk to the investor. The initial investment in the property will exceed $40 million. We know that there is a clear public safety risk to the community and to our first responders, and we risk losing an important part not only to our town's history, but to our country's history. So mitigating risk in a manner that serves the town's best interest is unquestionably at the heart of the solution.
Hello, my name is Carolyn Murray from KP Law. We serve as counsel to the town of Dudley, and I've been asked to speak with you today to explain the zoning amendments with respect to the Mill Conversion Overlay District coming up at this October special town meeting. In particular, we're discussing the Stevens Mill located at Ardlock and Mill Street and a proposed redevelopment project. But in fact, the zoning bylaw amendment that's proposed would impact all of the properties in the Mill Conversion Overlay District. So specifically, in the Mill Conversion Overlay District, residential uses such as the multifamily dwelling units and the assisted living facilities are only allowed in conjunction with certain types of commercial uses. And the bylaw is very specific about what types of commercial uses can be coupled with those residential uses to make that mixed use that comprises a Mill Conversion Overlay District. My understanding is that the town has had this bylaw on the books for about 10 years, and that the town has had several developers come forward with some projects proposing to rehabilitate the historic mills, but nothing has come to fruition to date. There's currently before the board a potential developer who would like to restore the historic mill property and bring some of the unique characteristics of the interior and exterior back to life. But in order to do this, the developer needs a little bit more flexibility with respect to those commercial components that are allowed to be combined with the residential uses. And that's what this proposal is before you at this upcoming town meeting. Now, we've heard some discussion about the special permit process and uses that are allowed by right, and I want to be clear about a few things. So a use allowed by right in the underlying industrial 43 district where the Stevens Mill is located, those will continue to be uses allowed by right. Just like any use that would also be allowed by special permit in the underlying industrial 43 district, they will continue to be allowed by special permit. The difference here is when we combine a residential use with a commercial use and we create this mill conversion project, those uses as a mixed use are all subject to a special permit in the Mill Conversion Overlay District. So let's just break this down a little bit more, and let's talk about what exactly the current Mill Conversion Overlay Bylaw allows. So it's found at Section 3-10 of your zoning bylaws, and a mill conversion project, which is defined as some sort of residential use combined with certain types of non-residential uses, is allowed by special permit of the planning board. Those specific non-residential uses currently include a restaurant, a retail or office, or certain institutional uses like a museum or a club or indoor recreational. There are standards that are set forth in Section 3.10.07 that also requires that if there is a residential component, that 10% of those residential units have to be designated as affordable. Now that has a specific meaning. Not just affordable, meaning you or I might be able to afford to rent one, but affordable meaning they would qualify for the town's subsidized housing inventory as maintained by the state, the Department of Housing and Community Development, and they qualify towards what is known as the town's 10% cap, which is under Chapter 40B. The current bylaw also has an inconsistency in it with respect to state law, in that the planning board is required to act within 90 days of submittal of an application. Now, as those of you may be familiar with special permit processes, whether it's the planning board or the zoning board, they have 65 days from the date that an application is received to open the public hearing. Well, the way the Mill Conversion Overlay Bylaw is written, they would then only have a few more days, it's a little over a month, to conclude that public hearing once they've opened the public hearing. That's actually not consistent with state law. So one of the proposals that's before you at this town meeting would be to make that provision consistent with state law. So let's talk about what the zoning amendment that is before you at this town meeting would do. And this is different from what was presented at the June town meeting in response to some of the concerns and feedback that town officials received. The particular zoning amendment that is before you for the October town meeting does not change any of the properties that are located in the Mill Conversion Overlay District. It doesn't change the permitting process. So in other words, everything that is in the Mill Conversion Overlay District that is a mill conversion project currently requires a special permit and site plan review from the planning board. There will be no change to that. The zoning amendment will still allow for a mill conversion project to consist of multifamily in conjunction with other commercial uses. But what is proposed is to expand the types of commercial uses that would be allowed as opposed to the restricted uses in the current bylaw. And those two new uses are as a community facility and an event center. So a mill conversion project, if this zoning bylaw is approved, could consist of residential units combined with a community facility or an event center. And that would now qualify as a mill conversion project where an applicant could submit to the planning board for special permit and site plan review. One of the other things that this proposed zoning amendment seeks to do is to relax the 10% affordable housing unit requirement currently found in the zoning bylaw. Now, this would not we're not proposing to do away with that requirement altogether. Instead, what the zoning amendment proposes is that an applicant could seek a waiver from that requirement. And that waiver process would consist of getting a favorable recommendation from the Board of Selectmen, and then a vote on a favorable vote on a waiver from the planning board, so that the 10% affordability, if that is something that does not fit into the developer's vision, that would be something that could be waived if the Planning Board and the Board of Selectmen were supportive of that. The final amendment is the housekeeping matter I was referring to about the time for the Planning Board to act on a special permit under this section. State law under Chapter 48, Section 9 says that a permit granting authority shall have from 90 days from the close of the public hearing to make a final determination on that petition. Right now, your zoning bylaw requires your planning board to make that final decision within 90 days of when the application is submitted. So this housekeeping matter amends this particular section of the zoning bylaw to make it in line with state law. The special permit criteria that is outlined in the Mill Conversion Overlay District is going to remain the same. The site plan review criteria is going to remain the same, and the planning board is going to remain the special permit granting authority.
Thank you for your time today, and thank you for your consideration of the zoning amendment. Again, my name is Carolyn Murray of KP Law, and we serve as counsel to the town of Dudley. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Stephen Medaus. I'm a partner at the law firm of Myrick O'Connell in Worcester, and I represent Camden Management Partners in their proposal to renovate the historic Stevens Mill building into an apartment complex. The amendments will provide flexibility for not just Camden Management Partners as a proposed developer, but any developer that is considering an investment in the Mill Conversion Overlay District. The flexibility is provided for both the developer and the town will have strict oversight of proposed changes to any project. As I mentioned, both the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board would need to vote to approve for any requested waivers from the commercial development component or the affordable housing requirement. And that's a rather extraordinary process in zoning that two boards have to concur. So it will certainly be in the best interest of the town, in my view, if both boards vote in favor of granting a waiver. Now, why is this flexibility important to Camden Management Partners? Because with a project of this scale and scope, as you can imagine, it requires quite an investment, a lot of money. And investors look at a developer's proposed project, and if it's not attractive enough, they obviously would not invest in it. So Camden Management Partners, in their experience, has determined that in some instances, if the project is all residential, does not include some commercial aspect, it would probably be more attractive in this marketplace for investment than if they were required to include a commercial development. So these proposed amendments provide that flexibility to the developer to put together a package that would be attractive to investors. So the importance of these proposed amendments is that the project is more likely to be realized if the town is able to have the flexibility to work with this developer to come up with a project that would be attractive to investors. So we respectfully request that you grant your planning board and your Board of Selectmen the flexibility provided by these amendments, and it's one step in a long journey towards saving and restoring the Stevens Mill. Thank you.
And now, John Gumpert, Managing Partner of Camden Management Partners.
So the first thing we do with a historic mill is to do a full market demand study to make sure the product that we're proposing actually has relevance in the community and will actually support the community, which came back positive, and we published with the city or the town. The demand study showed a very strong need for market rate housing. So we have a clean path on title, we have a clean path on environmental. Full design documents done outlining ingress and egress, showing the unit count, and showing the exterior renderings. We engaged a local architect to do that process for us. We've got 154 units in a mix of studios, ones, and two-bedroom units. We have some commercial space for events space, and in our previous mills, we've done a number of event, wedding venues, meeting venues, and some public storage as well. We would hope spring to summer of 21, we would commence construction. Expect an 18-month construction schedule. I have been working on historic properties for about 20 years. I've done a number of similar projects to Stevens, some larger, some smaller, over the last 20 years. The first one I did as a developer is the Sturkey Lofts in Knoxville. That really set off an entire part of town to redevelop. It is now fully redeveloped. It went from being a discarded part of town to now a cool part of town. We've done Woodside Mill in Gastonia, North Carolina, huge success. And now we're doing the Woodside Mill in Greenville, South Carolina. Both Luray and Woodside are substantially larger than Stevens, but similar projects. Yeah, the Woodside Mill is about a 550,000 square foot mill. We're probably 60% through construction on it. We'll deliver units by the end of the year, and we look to finish that one up in early 21. And really, the greatest example I have is the Sturkey Lofts in Knoxville, Tennessee, because it started as an abandoned project, and now it is the cool part of town to live in. So we have completely changed that entire section of town, and that was due to us buying the biggest abandoned building in the area and redeveloping it. It caused other redevelopment to occur. And again, it's a cool place to live. The units are really, stainless steel appliances, granite countertops in a cool, high ceiling, large window, concrete floor space. So we've proven that design is desirable to lots of people. But that's typically what we see. It's typically either retired folks or young professionals. One of the things I would say is the great thing about Stevens is there's a riverfront that no one really sees, and we're going to accentuate the riverfront. We're going to tie the river to the project, which I think is going to be a great amenity. Yeah, right now, the French River is hidden from the mill, and we're going to open that up and have a walkway and maybe an observation deck so people can go down and enjoy the river as part of the amenities of the development. And that amenity would serve both the commercial venue as well as the residential venue. And I would also say we are going to have a public event space that is really going to be a neat addition to the project. And it fits with some of our other projects. So for example, at Luray Mill, we probably host 150 weddings a year at that mill because it's a cool space and people like to gather there. We hope to do the same thing with Stevens. Say that past projects, Stevens is similar to many of my past projects. They all have a public component. They all are largely residential. They have some commercial to support the residential, and they always result in that area coming back to life. So Stevens is just like every other mill that I've done and every other historic project. At the end of the day is we have a proven product that we build that has a proven need, and we back that up with a demand study to show that. So we're confident in the project being successful. We don't start a project without finishing it, and the best testimonial I can give is just call the towns that we're working in currently and see what those towns say about the product we deliver. Because we deliver both housing and public space, and both work hand in hand. We're not building an apartment complex that you put a fence around and it's only for the residents that live there. It's for the community. And we have proven that model time and time again. So it's exciting, as you can tell, by my voice. It's exciting to do the project because I know it'll be a success, and not only for the individual project, but for the surrounding community. Our next steps are to complete the design, ensure that we're permittable, and that we have the proper zoning in place for it. Then attract our lenders and drive it towards a closing. All of that we control. The lenders is the one part that we'll move around as COVID moves around. But beyond that, we're in good shape. We're moving full speed ahead. I can tell you that. The process with this town has been great. It's a process we're comfortable with. It's a process we're used to. It's very much a collaborative effort between the town and the developer to get a project like this off the ground. I mean, it takes everybody's cooperation and everybody's creativity to do it. It's one of the great pleasures of doing these type of developments is you're working hand in hand with everybody in the community to get the project done. It is not, it's that way in every community we go into. And it's easy for me because I can just tell the town leaders, go talk to the last community and see what they think. And that is a great part of the business. Our reputation and our history is we do such a good job on these projects that I expect to use this town of Dudley as a reference for future people to call and say, how did it work out?
Over more than a decade, the town has had 7 investors show interest in developing Stevens Mill. 6 of those investors have walked away from the project, most of them pointing to the many local and state obstacles to overcome. For over 3 years now, and throughout the pandemic, the town has remained engaged with a 7th potential investor, Camden Partners. Camden has a unique perspective on the possibilities of Stevens Mill, and having spent the past year discussing the possibilities and the solutions and future potential of the property with our legal team, our planning board, our economic development committee, our local legislators, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Governor Baker's office, and the meeting at the town hall with Lieutenant Governor Polito, and with the strong work and annual encouragement of our historical commission to advocate for historical tax credits and to save the mill, we strongly believe that we are now finally on the road to a solution.
So what does a yes vote do on this zoning amendment? A yes vote retains the mill conversion overlay district in its current composition. It still requires a mill conversion project to be subject to a site plan special permit from the planning board, but it expands the commercial uses that may be allowed in combination with a residential use to comprise that mill conversion project as defined in the bylaw. A no vote leaves the mill conversion overlay district and the bylaw intact exactly as it exists at section 3.10 of your zoning bylaws. Passage of this amendment does require a 2/3 vote at town meeting.
There is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for a great outcome in partnering with private equity investors to save the mill and to realize the potential to generate growth and future economic development opportunities in our community. But before we can do that, we need to face some hard facts. There will likely not be many, if any, more opportunities for us to develop the mill. The condition of the building is such that there will be little left if we don't seize on the opportunity before us. Unfortunately, though, there is no magic wand that we can wave to quickly make this a solution or a reality. There is no boilerplate template that we can just readily apply. We have a plan, but the fact is that there is a lot of work to do. We as a community must generate conditions that make a $40 million initial investment both possible and palatable for an investor.
Hello, my name is Steve Fortrova. I'm a lifelong resident of Dudley and a Dudley Planning Board member, and I am in favor of the Stevens Linen Mill project, and I hope you will give it your consideration this fall at town meeting. Thank you.
This year has been like none other in our country's history. A global pandemic, stay-at-home orders, businesses forced to shut down, some forever, civil unrest, isolation from our families, friends, and neighbors, no traditional school, no traditional sports, and deep political divisions rivaled only by those that existed during the time when the very structures that we are now proposing to save were originally built. As individuals, we have all managed to overcome the challenges that this year has posed. Now, as a community, we have the opportunity to take action that will preserve the fabric, nature, and history of our community for generations to come. I urge you to vote in favor of the zoning bylaw amendment at the October 19th town meeting, and in doing so, join the community in supporting the conversion of a landmark that has served as a symbol of home for past generations into homes and a source of pride for generations to come.